Okay. Okay. Uh-oh. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me start over. I've got to get in the habit of doing this. Welcome, welcome to a special agenda. Thank you all for joining me tonight again, taking times out of your schedule with your loved ones from work, um, personal time, things that you need to do to spend time listening to this discussion and engaging with me. If you have questions, please post them. I will answer at the speed that I can read them. I'll put my glasses back on for that. Thank you all so much again for joining me and taking this time out of your schedule once again. And we'll be discussing something that I didn't realize that I wasn't doing effectively. Everybody that knows us, and we'll start out by discussing our personal journey. My husband and I, we have special needs kids, but there are more things that are typical about them that are different. So I like to describe them as um, differently able, because we forget sometimes that as many things that they have that are different, they have gifts as well. And one of the things that I say is one of their gifts is honesty. I love the fact that my son is honest with me. Sometimes a little too honest. Um, the shade, the, the shade that we receive so many times because they are honest about the things that they see and experience with us. One particular time that I find it honest, he made me change my clothes. He didn't ask me to, but I asked him how my outfit looked, and he told me I looked cute, even though it looked a little tight and made me look fat. I said, "Thank you. Uh, I appreciate that." Oftentimes, and the reason I brought that up is because there are times when we, as adults, we've trained ourselves. Society has trained us. Decorum is what it's sometimes called, manners, and depends on the situation, where we are encouraged to not necessarily be honest in our communications with people because we don't want to hurt their feelings. Even in situations where it means that you do need to set boundaries and defend what's happening rather than let things go. There and in those instances, in those particular moments where we need to be, as I call it, creatively honest, where you try not to offend that person, or it's a situation where it is a matter of being professional and still addressing a concern, whether it involves you or a client or other situations where you need to be diplomatic, as they say, and handle things in a way in which it won't create conflict. Sometimes in those moments, because we have trained ourselves over time to not understand that masking how you feel about something when something is happening that needs to be addressed is not necessarily the proper thing to do. Yes, things need to be handled properly, but we don't need to skip over or ignore or be dishonest in those moments. Because what will happen is you will set yourself up or that person up to believe that what they're doing, if they are doing something that's not appropriate or unfair or mean or other things that may be or may be offensive, we don't engage by honestly answering that, or we just don't address it at all. And we expect later for them to understand what they've done wrong, whether it be a mate, whether it be a manager that we work with, a good friend, a child, a family member. Sometimes we're not honest and we think that that's acceptable. And it's important that we be honest with ourselves that yes, this particular thing was not okay. But in order for us to correct it, we have to be mindful of letting that person know. Even if it's not in that particular moment, because maybe in that second you can't address it in the manner it needs to be, but you need to put a pin in that and come back to it. Because sometimes we think that they know what it is that they've done to offend us, and they have absolutely no idea. Because one, their intentions might have been different than what we thought they were. Now, there have been times when, and there will be times when people will do things intentionally because they are testing your boundaries and they're testing theirs. They'll see how far you'll let it go, and they'll see how far they can go. And that being your children will definitely do that. When having special needs kids, it is crucial that you help them by setting boundaries for you and for them. As parents, sometimes we forget that we are their mentors, and everything we do, they're learning. They're learning that if they aren't on the spectrum, they're learning that if they don't have disabilities. There used to be a saying, and people still say it: do as I say, not as I do. Yet that creates generational trauma. You are teaching your children that it is acceptable to do what you want to do. And at some point, they'll get to do what they want to do, even if you're showing them something that's not healthy, something that's not good. Once my son caught me completely off guard, and he was watching something that he shouldn't have been watching. It had some horrible language in it. And when I say he caught me off guard, he caught me off guard because I had to take a step back and look at myself. And what he said to me was, I said to him, you need to not watch this kind of language. This isn't acceptable. And he said to me, well, what age can I start watching stuff that has cursing in it? I said, wait, huh? And then he said to me, you all watch stuff that has profanity in it. I had to take a look back at myself and go, he just checked me, and he didn't mean to. And that did not mean that I needed to correct or discipline him. I needed to correct and discipline myself. Because at that point, I realized he knew that I was watching some things that, and in my mind, I'm like, I know not to use this kind of language, but that's not the point. You can't tell someone not to ingest something that you are taking in. What are you teaching your children? That your behavior that's not good behavior is okay for you? At what behavior do you make better choices? As parents, you have to be mindful of what you teach them. And as people that say they have a relationship with our Heavenly Father that is honest, because sometimes we forget that while we are saying to our Heavenly Father in prayer, please forgive me for the things that I am doing, have we made a habit of doing these things and excusing them? And at what point what are you apologizing for? Are you apologizing for choosing to do this, or for the pattern that you created to do it? For me, I had to go, I'm making poor choices, and he is seeing this. That also means our Heavenly Father sees us also. So then we have to make a audible decision within ourselves and say, I hear it now. That's a conversation my son and I have sometimes when he's talking to me and I have to correct him because oftentimes, like I said, they're honest and their intention is not necessarily to be mean spirited. It's just to point out what they see that is obvious to them. But I have to say, your tone. I said, the problem is not what you said, it's how you said it. But it was never with the intention of being disrespectful. And there have been moments when I've had to have that conversation with myself and say, so what are you trying to do right here? So when we have those conversations with other people that we work with, if you don't want to take on overtime constantly, it might be best if you let your boss know why you don't want to take on overtime constantly. If you have spiritual meetings that you want to attend, then you need to let them know that you won't be able to work these hours. Don't constantly take on stuff you don't want to do, because then when you can't do it or you decided to put your foot down and say, I'm no longer doing this. This is overwhelming. This is too much. This is not fair to me. But you've done it for so long, at some point, they begin to think that there is another issue when the issue that you're having is with the one you always had, but you never was intentional and mindful about the fact of what this would look like down the road if you continue to do something you never wanted to start. My mother-in-law always says, don't start doing anything that you don't want to continue. And with special needs kids, when you set boundaries for them and helping them with their behaviors, many times the reason that they have meltdowns is because, one, they're having a problem communicating. Two, they're not getting what they want out of that moment. And it's not quite clear on how they will achieve what it is they're looking for. If it's something that they cannot do for safety reasons or time, that needs to be they need to be clear on that, and you need to let them know that ahead of time. But you also have to let them know what behaviors are acceptable. Once you start to do that, their behavior will start to change. You can help them modify that behavior. And that's called, in therapy, they call it ABA, which is applied behavior analysis. You monitor how their behavior is, and then you try to help them to change that. And oftentimes, for the parents, it's you that has to change what you're doing so that you can help them to correct their behavior, so that they'll be happier, so that they can be calm, because it does affect your whole household. It affects you mentally, it affects your mate, it affects their siblings. And in order for everyone to have a healthy mental balance, because it will get to the point where it's too much for everyone. And everyone needs to be able to communicate that. You need to have a moment where there are times through the week that for us, we have times where we talk. My husband and I do it separately, away from the children. And then we take our time to individually talk to each of them. Earlier, I called back because, in all honesty, I'm going to apologize right now for the quality of this video, because I'm using the phone that once was mine and I gave it to my son. And I left my phone, but because I had confiscated his, I had a phone. I did not mean for this to go like this. It just kind of, my backup plan was a backup plan by accident. I got to my location and I did not have my phone, but because this was set up, I was able to do it. But I called my home to talk to my husband and let him know that I had left my phone. I wasn't asking him to bring it. I was just notifying him of something and checking on something else. And he let me know about what was going on with our daughter's behavior, and that he had taken the time to take her aside and talk to her. There was a small miscommunication. My son said something to my daughter and called her dude. For anybody else, they would have been able to gloss that over. But because she's on the spectrum, she's quite literal. and she did not understand his intentions. To her, he was calling her a guy, and she was not flying with that. My husband had to explain to her that it was not his intention to call her a dude. He did not think she was a guy. And I had to, he says, well, you could talk to her. I said, I don't have enough time. I said, what you can tell her though is he loves her. And that's what he calls his friends, all of them, whether they're girls or guys. So, what he meant by that was she was his friend. It was just a form of endearment. It wasn't literal, it was something figurative, meaning it was not something he meant that you look like or are in any way a male. And then I quickly got off the phone. But that is what we do to work with our kids so that they kind of understand what direction we are heading. And it's important that we are understanding that everybody's intentions aren't always the same. I knew that I had a habit of, and I didn't realize what a bigger issue it was and how sometimes those things come back to bite you. And one of the issues that I had was I would cut people off if I didn't understand their intentions without taking the time to go back and explain to them what had been offensive about that. Letting people, not correcting people, even when they misunderstood what it was I was trying to say. Because sometimes conversations are